Thank you very much. It's indeed a great pleasure and a great honor to be invited to deliver the first Comrade Suresh Dhupeshwarkar lecture by the All India Bank Employees Association. I have known the All India Bank Employees Association for many years. I have known their activities and their efforts at a time when this government, particularly the present government, is determined to crush all unions and associations. The All India Bank Employees Association is one association which has been standing up, standing out, and resisting all the efforts of the government to crush as well as to privatize banks in India. In fact, one of the cases that I am dealing with is a petition to effectuate a provision in the Banking Act which says that every public sector bank must have one employee director and one workman director. For the last 10 years, this Modi government has not appointed a single workman director or employee director in any one of the public sector banks in this country. This just shows the kind of respect for the rule of law that this present government has. So I am very happy and delighted to be here at the invite of the All India Bank Employees Association. The reason why I thought that I should speak on electoral bonds is not merely because it's a new hot topical subject, but because the subject encapsulates within it a lot of the problems of our current electoral democracy. So what happened with electoral bonds? The BJP government introduced them in 2017 and finally the bonds started being sold in 2018. The stated justification, so what are electoral bonds? Electoral bonds are a kind of bearer bonds which you can go and purchase from only the state, from designated branches of the state bank in denominations from 1,000 rupees to 1 crore rupees and give them to a political party. The electoral bonds do not carry any name. It's like just a note. You can give them to any political party and only a political party can encash those bonds. They were made anonymous, and the reason why they were made anonymous was stated by Mr. Jaitley. He said that that if the ruling party comes to know who is donating the money to the opposition parties, then the ruling party can victimize those companies, and therefore companies are reluctant to donate to opposition parties. Another justification which was trotted out later was that electoral bonds you can only buy through banking channels by either depositing a bank draft or through your transfer of your bank money. And therefore you need to have a KYC, etc. Therefore, he said that this will encourage the use of banking money to be given to political parties, unlike cash which is currently being given. These were the two justifications. The then Election Commission and the then Reserve Bank opposed these electoral bonds for different reasons. Election Commission at that time, of course today the Election Commission is a very different kind of Election Commission. That was a time when we still had some independent election commissioners. It is impossible to imagine the Election Commission today opposing anything that the government wants. Later, of course, in the court, the Election Commission also flipped. The new members who came they started supporting the electoral bonds, though initially the Election Commission opposed it by saying that these anonymous donations by companies or individuals to parties would defeat the whole purpose of transparency of political funding, and that this also allows the possibility of money laundering through the creation of shell companies through which these bonds can be bought and laundered. Reserve Bank also said that this opens the possibility of money laundering, and they also said that it is not proper for the state bank to be made the agency for the electoral bonds, and if at all electoral bonds have to be issued, they have to be issued only through the Reserve Bank. Now, if you examine both these justifications, the first justification is that anonymity avoids victimization of the donors by the government. Now, what was not disclosed at that time and which came out later was that these bonds had an alphanumeric number. Each bond had an alphanumeric number, and that number could be seen through ultraviolet light, and that the state bank was recording the number of each bond which was sold to any person, and also recording the number of each bond which was encashed by any political party. And therefore the state bank had complete information about who had purchased these bonds and donated them to which party. Which means, since the state bank is controlled by the central government, it meant that the central government in any case had this information or had access to this information about who was donating these bonds to whom. And that completely defeated the stated first object of bringing in these bonds, the object of not allowing victimization of companies by the ruling party. They could still be victimized because the ruling party could always come to know. The second justification was that this will lead to only bank money going to parties, rather money going through banking channels, and will reduce or eliminate the use of cash. And therefore, simultaneously, the government also brought an amendment which said, initially, you see, the rule was that any donation received by a political party above 20,000 had to be reported by the political party as to who has given them this money. Below 20,000, you didn't have to report. Now they reduced this limit from 20,000 to 2,000. Saying that, well, this is an attempt to reduce the use of cash in political donations. But the catch is this. See, when a party says, as some parties had been saying, that I have received, say, 500 crores through petty cash donations below 20,000 rupees, now the party would say that I have received same 500 crores through petty cash donations of less than 2,000 rupees. See, they would only have to say, well, we went to a public meeting, we put out our sheet, people gave 100, 200, 500 rupees, etc., and we got 500 crores. We collected 500 crores in this manner. So therefore, effectively, changing the limit from 20,000 to 2,000 made no difference. Practically, it made no difference. We challenged the electoral bonds in the courts in 2017 itself as soon as the scheme was introduced on three broad grounds. We said that it defeats the right of citizens to know who is funding which political party, which is a fundamental right under Article 19(1)(a), which has been held by the Supreme Court to be a fundamental right. Second, we said that this is going to encourage bribe giving because under the cover of anonymity, a lot of the companies who will be buying and donating electoral bonds to parties would be doing so by way of bribes and kickbacks for contracts, for policy changes, for various other favors that they could be receiving from the government, which is controlled by that political party. And third, we said that this is going to make the level playing field in elections completely uneven, because the bonds would be received largely by ruling parties, primarily by ruling party at the center and secondarily by ruling parties in the states, and virtually nothing would be received by political parties which are not in power. So ultimately the Supreme Court, though it took 6 years to decide our petition, it finally decided after 6 years and held that this whole scheme was unconstitutional for all the 3 grounds that we had stated in our petition. It also, fortunately, ordered the disclosure, because by this time it was known that bonds have a number, and therefore, and somewhere or the other it is recorded that which bond number was purchased by whom and which bond number has been encashed by which political party. So ultimately the Supreme Court ordered the disclosure of these bond numbers. The State Bank of India shamelessly filed an application saying that no, Supreme Court said in 3 weeks you disclose all the information that you have about these bonds. Shamelessly the State Bank filed an application, or was made to file an application, saying that no, we need 3.5 months more to collect this information, because this information is recorded in 2 places. One, when who purchased the bonds, and the second, who encashed those bonds. And to match these, there are 22,000 bonds, and to match these 22,000 numbers will take us 3.5 months. The Supreme Court said, no, you give us this information within 2 days, because you have this information. So they gave the information in 2 days, the bond numbers, who has purchased them. Sorry, the bond numbers they didn't give. They just gave who purchased these electoral bonds and who deposited the electoral bonds date-wise, but they didn't give the bond numbers. Then the Supreme Court said that, look, why haven't you given the bond numbers? Then they were made to give the bond numbers within 1 more day, and it took exactly 2 minutes for any computer expert to match those 22,000 numbers, and in 2 minutes the computer told you which bond number was purchased on which date by whom and deposited by which party on which date. And when this information finally came out, what came out was exactly what we had suspected. We had suspected that most of these bonds would have been given by companies by way of kickbacks and bribes, and this is exactly what appears to have happened, because we find that most of these bonds, if you look at just the analysis, actually the information, unfortunately the Supreme Court only ordered the information to be given after its first interim order of April 2019. So we don't have information about the first 14 months of the electoral bond scheme, in which more than 4,000 crores of electoral bonds were bought and encashed. We only have information of the last 12,500 worth of electoral bonds, and out of that we find that 50% went to the BJP, and out of the remaining 50%, most went to the ruling parties in the states, primarily the TMC, the Congress, the BRS, or this Odisha ruling party of Naveen Patnaik, etc. Now some analysis was done. I'll just give you a broad analysis of how much electoral bonds were given to the BJP by companies who received contracts from governments controlled by the BJP. So, out of those 6,000 or so crores that the BJP received, out of the total of 12,000 plus crores between April 2019 till February 24, we find 2004 crores out of the 6,000 and odd crores is given by companies who received contracts worth 3,60,000 crores. So the companies received contracts of 3,60,000 crores, from which they gave 2,000 and odd crores to the BJP, who ran the governments who gave these contracts. One of them notoriously is this Maharashtra government, which gave in April 2023, a company called Mega Engineering gave 140 crores of electoral bonds to the BJP, and next month in May, within 3 weeks, they received a contract worth 14,000 crores. 14,000 crores, that is 100 times the kickback that they had given. And that is why, when we see these figures, see the total bonds were only 16,000 crores. But the contracts which were influenced by these bonds are worth lakhs and lakhs of crores. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. The other thing that happened was policy changes. That in many cases, the government changed policies for the benefit of companies which gave them the electoral bonds. Two examples of that are, in Bharti Telecom case, see the earlier Supreme Court, when they quashed the 2G licenses by saying that these 2G spectrum licenses had been arbitrarily given, it ordered that in future these only should be given by auction. But in 2023, in a telecom bill which was passed without any discussion in Parliament, the policy was changed to allow again allocation of satellite spectrum by just allocation without auction. And that allocation was given to a foreign company which is ultimately owned by Bharti Telecom. And this Bharti Telecom gave how many crores? About 150 crores by way of electoral bonds to the BJP. So now the amount of money that when 2G scam happened, it was claimed that it was a scam of 1,75,000 crores, because that is the potential revenue that it could have generated had it been auctioned. That was the claim. Now the potential revenue that this could have generated, the satellite spectrum, had it been auctioned, could be tens of thousands of crores. So you have taken a bribe of 150 crores and given away a gift of tens of thousands of crores to a company. Same thing happened in this Grasim case, where import policy was changed in favor of Grasim to favor Grasim, and Grasim in turn gave electoral bonds to the BJP. Then there are a large number of cases of pharmaceutical companies which were facing action from the drug controller for substandard drugs, who then gave electoral bonds, and thereafter those drugs appear to have just been allowed to continue, putting the health of crores of people in this country at risk because of this bribe. Then there are a large number of cases, in fact 2,400 plus crores were given to the BJP by companies which were facing action of the Enforcement Directorate or Income Tax or CBI. And after these donations, it appears that the whole trail has gone cold, which means that thereafter it appears that there has been no further follow-up action by these agencies. Now, how much money could have been recovered if these agencies, one possibility is that the action which was threatened against these companies was a bogus action only to extort money from these companies. So like hafta vasuli. The other is that yes, those companies had evaded taxes, had done money laundering, etc. And after they gave some donations to the BJP, 2,400 crores worth of donations to the BJP, they were allowed to go scot-free. How much money could have been recovered by way of income tax or ED action, etc.? It could be lakhs of crores. So you have surrendered lakhs of crores for getting a kickback of 2,400 crores by withdrawing your hand. And therefore, Nirmala Sitharaman's husband Parkala Prabhakar has called this electoral bonds to be not just the largest scam in the country, but probably the largest scam in the world. It dwarfs the 2G scam or the Colgate scam by many factors and in many ways. It's a scam which shows many things. You see, recently, it shows you the character of these agencies, the ED, the IT, the CBI, that they became accomplices in this crime of bribery and corruption, in which involved officers, some officers of that company, some officers of the political party, some officers of the government, and some officers of this ED, IT, or CBI. It just lays bare. In fact, recently, a few days ago, the Indian Express did a story about 25 MPs and MLAs who, after facing action from the Enforcement Directorate or Income Tax, joined the BJP. And after joining the BJP, out of these 25, against 23, the ED or the IT withdrew those actions, which means, and that is why it is called the BJP's washing machine, that once you join the BJP, and now of course some of these leaders of the BJP say this very openly. Yesterday or day before yesterday, this Athavale, who is one of the ministers, who was a minister here in Maharashtra, was saying openly, look, everybody is welcome to our party. And all these corrupt people, they have to decide whether they want to join our party or whether they want to go to jail. So very openly saying that if you join our party, you will avoid going to jail. Otherwise, we will put you in jail. So actually, this electoral bond scheme is not just an eye-opener on the many different forms of corruption that are taking place in this country. It is also a great eye-opener about the manner in which these investigative agencies, the Enforcement Directorate, the CBI and the Income Tax are behaving as just political tools of the government. And that is why we say that, look, so far there is only a strong prima facie evidence which has been uncovered by these electoral bonds of the many kinds of extortion and many kinds of bribery that was going on through these electoral bonds. But what we really need is an investigation to find out who are the people in the company, in the party, in the government, and in these agencies who were involved in this conspiracy of corruption. And they have to be held accountable. In the 2G and the Coalgate case, the Supreme Court ordered court-monitored investigations even though there was no money trail, merely because there was arbitrary allocation of spectrum or coal mining leases. Here there is a clear money trail. In one of the cases, this gentleman some Sarath Reddy, who runs a company called Aurobindo Pharma, he was the main accused in the Delhi liquor scam. He says that I gave 100 crores to the Aam Aadmi Party, and Arvind Kejriwal and others, Manish Sisodia and others told me who to give the money to. Now, that gentleman was made an approver, which means he was pardoned. He was granted bail. The enforcement directorate did not oppose his bail. And then it is found that at that very time he gave 60 crores to the BJP by way of electoral bonds. And on his oral statement, this Kejriwal and Sisodia and this the other several people have been arrested primarily on his statement. I don't know whether Aam Aadmi Party was involved in a liquor scam or not, but you can't arrest a chief minister on an oral statement of a accused, who is the main accused in that case, and whom the BJP, meaning the ED, has made an approver and received 60 crores by way of electoral bonds. And that is why the Aam Aadmi Party people are rightly saying that here you have a money trail of a kickback being received by the BJP for the favor of naming Arvind Kejriwal and some of the Aam Aadmi Party people as accused in that liquor scam, or what is called the liquor scam. So therefore, this is a case which is crying for an independent investigation, because how do you hold these people accountable? Yes, we have come to know, but shouldn't these people be held accountable for all this? And shouldn't the proceeds of the crime be confiscated if it is found that the bulk of the money given through electoral bonds are really proceeds of crime? Why should that money not be confiscated from the political parties who have received these monies? So therefore, this is a case crying for a full-fledged independent criminal investigation. But who is to investigate? Not the CBI, because CBI itself appears to have been an accomplice in this, because they became an instrument or a party to extracting this money from some of these companies. CBI, ED, IT, they all became accomplices in this. And therefore, this needs to be investigated by a special, somebody will say, well, why can't it be investigated by the Lokpal? We had a big, as you know, agitation for a Lokpal. Ultimately, the Lokpal Act came. But for 3 years thereafter, no Lokpal was appointed. After the Modi government came, no Lokpal was appointed for more than 3 years. We had to go repeatedly to the court to press for appointment of a Lokpal. But ultimately, when the court ordered them to appoint a Lokpal, they appointed a Lokpal who was thoroughly suspect and who did nothing. Now recently, they have appointed the main Lokpal, a judge of the Supreme Court, who has given all kinds of beneficial judgments to this Modi government by way of in PMLA, in UAPA, in absolving Modi of the 2002 riots and so on and so forth. Any number of judgments he has given to benefit this party, and now he has been rewarded with this Lokpal. Will he do an independent investigation? Therefore, the only independent investigation which can be done in this matter is through a court-appointed special investigative team supervised by a retired judge appointed by the Supreme Court and headed by some retired officers of impeccable integrity of the CBI or any other investigative organization. So, but today, one of the things that this electoral bonds shows is the imbalance of money power between the ruling party and the other parties. So on the one hand, you have BJP, which gets more than 50% of the electoral bonds. Of course, if you look at all corporate donations that have been made in this country, the BJP gets even more. About some 2/3 of all the corporate donations are given only to one party, that is the BJP, and the 1/3 is shared by all the rest of the political parties put together. Because electoral bonds is only one part of the donations that the BJP receives. But now look at the quantity. So an election candidate in an election can spend a maximum of 75 lakhs in a Lok Sabha election. So if the BJP puts up 500 candidates, maximum all of them put together can spend under the law is 400 crores. But in electoral bonds alone, the BJP in 6 years got more than 8,000 crores. And they got another 8,000 crores in these 6 years by way of other donations. So where is 400 crores versus 15,000 crores? Means ki 40 times. So you have made a mockery. There is no limit to spending by a political party. And therefore the limit on spending by individual candidates is meaningless, farcical. Because candidate can spend 75 lakhs, the political party can spend 40 crores on his election. And some candidates are actually spending 40 crores in cash by declaring only 75 lakhs to the Election Commission. And they are not caught, not called out, not caught by the Election Commission. Because the Election Commission says, we don't know whether how much he has spent in cash, etc. Now, when demonetization was done, one of the reasons given by the Prime Minister was that I want a cashless economy. I want a less cash economy. And I want all people to transact business only through banking channels. Now, I can understand that individuals, ordinary people cannot be made to do everything through bank, but at least political parties and candidates could have been forced to transact all their business through bank. One amendment to the Representation of People Act, which would have said all political parties and candidates can only take money or spend money through banking channels, no cash. If you are caught taking or spending cash, that will be a corrupt practice and you will be disqualified. It was very easy to do, but that was not done. Why? Because the ruling party gets all this money. There is such huge imbalance in the money which the ruling party gets and the money which the other parties get that it creates a totally uneven playing field in electoral politics. And our elections, unfortunately, have become a game of just propaganda and money. Because one reason for that, one major reason for that is, we have a system of first past the post at two levels. First, when we elect our candidate, the candidate who gets the maximum votes becomes the sole representative of that constituency. Then, when the government is formed, the party or coalition which has a majority becomes the only body in charge of the government, and the other parties together, even if they have 49% of the MLAs, their vote counts for nothing in running the government. Therefore, when people go to vote, they know that only one candidate will win and only one party will form the government. Therefore, even if they feel that candidate A belonging to party A is the best candidate, they will not vote for him if they feel that he has no chance of winning. So, they will see which party or candidate have some chance of winning, and they will vote for that party or candidate who they feel is relatively less bad. And how do they form this perception of who has a chance of winning? That perception is formed largely on the basis of visibility of the party and the candidate. And visibility today is largely a function of money. So, those parties or candidates which have a lot of money, they are able to make themselves visible through advertisements, through posters, banners, hoardings, even through public meetings which are organized by paying money to people to bring crowds. So, that is why in order to reduce this role of money in elections, a limit was put on candidates. But unfortunately, no limit on political parties. Unfortunately, no way of ensuring that the candidate also spends within that limit. Therefore, if we are to have any kind of realistic semblance of fair elections, we need to have several kinds of electoral reforms. Firstly, actually, if you start from the basics, we need some democracy reforms first. In India, we have only representative democracy, we have no direct democracy whatsoever. In most countries across the world, they have at least some forms of direct democracy, which means that they have a system of initiative and referendum in which people can directly, if they feel, if enough people feel that they want the Lokpal, for example, they can move an initiative, say 10% of the voters, if they sign an initiative saying that we want a Lokpal law, then the whole thing is put before the whole country as a referendum, and if the majority of the people vote for that, it becomes law on its own. We don't have any system like that. We need to move towards that. But even within electoral politics, we need many reforms. In order to curb the influence of money, we need firstly this proportional representation. Today we have first past the post. In proportional representation, even if a party gets 2% vote, it gets at least 2% of its MPs. So a party, let's say nationally gets 2% vote, it will have at least 10 MPs. Today a party which gets 2% vote gets nothing. No MP. Therefore you feel that you are wasting your vote. At least there you will vote for the party that you consider best. Then you need a limit on spending by political parties. Then you need to enforce that limit. You have to pass a law saying that cash will not be allowed. Then you also need some state funding of elections. So there are some candidates who are very good, who are very well known, but who have no money. They don't even have 75 lakhs to contest. So state funding is a very easy thing. It is there in many countries. All that you say is, per vote you will get say 50 rupees. So if you get 1.5 lakh votes, you will get 75 lakh rupees. So you can borrow money from friends, contest the election. If you are a serious candidate and you get substantial number of votes, the state will give you that much money and you can repay that person. So that makes it a somewhat more level playing field, doesn't make elections a matter. Actually, in England and in many other countries, they don't hardly spend any money in elections. It is only in countries like India where elections, in India and USA also, where elections have become a matter of just money and propaganda. And today money is all in the hands of the ruling party at the center, and instruments of propaganda are also in their hands. Because media is controlled by them, they have controlled the media by way of government advertisements, that only those who do government's propaganda will be given government advertisements and government money. And those who do not come to heel even by that inducement, they will be brought to heel by using ED, IT, etc. And NDTV was virtually forced to sell by the use of these agencies. NDTV was the sort of last television mainstream channel which was holding out. Others have more or less surrendered. They have become part of what is called Godi media. So, and on top of that, the government is also misusing government money, public money, for advertising just the Prime Minister. You see all over in newspapers, on ration sacks, everywhere, vaccine certificates, Prime Minister's photo, everywhere you go you see Modi's photo, and all done largely by public money. So therefore, we need serious reforms, electoral reforms, if we want to bring any kind of semblance of fair electoral democracy in this country. And then you have the Election Commission. See, Election Commission was supposed to be the body which was supposed to ensure that there are proper rules enforced which ensure at least some kind of fairness in election. But today we have an Election Commission which is totally partisan, totally controlled. We filed a petition saying that appointment of election commissioners cannot be left to the government alone, and there should be an independent selection committee. Constitution bench of the Supreme Court agreed with us and ordered that there should be a selection committee consisting of the Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, and the Chief Justice. Unfortunately, the government brought a law which said that no, we will only have, they kicked out the Chief Justice, and they said that we'll have the Prime Minister, another minister chosen by the Prime Minister, and the Leader of Opposition. We challenged this law also. Notices were issued. Then when 2 vacancies arose in the Election Commission, we filed an application saying that, well, there are 2 vacancies out of 3. These 2, it will be very dangerous if the government is allowed to appoint these 2. These 2 should be appointed through that selection committee in that Constitution bench judgment, that is Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition, and Chief Justice. Court said that all right, we will hear it day after tomorrow. Very next day, they moved heaven and earth and appointed the 2 ECs. Leader of Opposition said that I was given just 5 minutes. 5 minutes before I was told that these are the 6 shortlisted names, you decide. He said that, look, I need some time to study this. They said nothing doing, and they appointed 2 people. So, we'll have to go back to the Constitution bench judgment. I hope that the Supreme Court hears our challenge to this law soon and holds this law to be unconstitutional, which has changed that judgment. So we need, and then lastly the issue of EVMs. Actually, I will restrict myself to electoral democracy today. Of course, there are many more serious problems with our whole democracy in this country, but I'll restrict myself to the problems in our electoral democracy. Then there is this huge problem of electronic voting machines. You see, electronic voting machines, the design of the electronic voting machines changed after the VVPATs were introduced. VVPATs are those printers where you see the slip of the symbol of the party that you have voted for. Supreme Court said that, look, it's too dangerous to have counting and voting only through these electronic voting machines. You need to have a paper trail. So you need to put up these VVPAT machines where the paper of the or the symbol of the party that you have voted for will be printed and the voter can see them. And the rule says that the printer has to have a transparent glass. Now, unfortunately, what happened was that when these VVPATs were introduced, the design of the EVMs had to be changed. Because earlier, the electronic voting machine only recorded, all right, how many people pressed number 1 button, how many people pressed number 2 button, how many people pressed number 3 button, and from that it was calculated which party received how many votes. So it could be like a simple calculator. Now, both the EVM and the VVPAT had to have a programmable chip inside, because the positioning of the parties, who is number 1, who is number 2, who is number 3, could change. And the VVPAT had to print the symbol of the party whose button had been pressed. And this could be different from constituency to constituency. Therefore, you had to put a programmable chip in both the VVPAT and the EVMs. And now, in 2017, just before the Gujarat election, they changed the design of the VVPAT machine and they put a black opaque glass instead of a transparent glass on the VVPAT machine, so that you cannot see from outside what is inside until a bulb lights up inside the machine. And that bulb lights up for exactly 7 seconds. And then it goes off. So you see your slip for 7 seconds and then the bulb goes off. You don't see the slip cutting and falling inside the box. Now, if you put a malicious program which says that, all right, if somebody votes, you print that slip and show him that slip, but don't cut the slip. If the second person also votes for that same candidate, say non-BJP candidate, then don't print another slip, just show him that same slip. So again the bulb will go on. That second person will see the same slip which was shown to the first person, and then the light will go off after 7 seconds. That person will be satisfied, he'll go away. Now, as soon as the light goes off, this slip will cut and fall, and one more slip of the BJP, let us say, will be printed, and that will also cut and fall, and the same signal goes to the EVM. So the EVM, instead of recording 2, say, Congress votes, will record 1 Congress and 1 BJP vote. And the slips will also show 1 Congress symbol, 1 BJP symbol. So therefore, earlier I used to think that if we count all the VVPAT today, they are counting only 2% of the VVPAT slips. They are saying that this 2% is enough for a sample match. And even when there is a mismatch between EVM count and VVPAT count, they don't count all the VVPATs. They say that only for this particular booth, the VVPAT count will prevail. If it has malfunctioned in this particular booth, it could have malfunctioned in others also. What's the use of doing a sample count otherwise? But they don't do that. But I am saying that I used to think that if they count all the VVPAT slips, that will do the trick, that would be adequate. But that will not be adequate because of this malicious programming. Therefore, what is required is what the India Alliance has said, that you give the slip in the hand of the voter and allow him to see the slip and put the slip in a ballot box, and thereafter you count the slips in the ballot box. That's a safe way. Alternatively, you move to ballot papers. If you don't want to move to ballot papers, you just give them the slip, because the slip should fall in the box. The voter should be able to take out that slip, look at it, and put it in the ballot box. That's good enough, and then count the ballot slips. The BJP has, before it came to power, has been crying hoarse that these EVMs are manipulated. Their fellow, that GVK Rao, he wrote a whole book on this. What's his name? GVK? GVL Narasimha Rao. He wrote a whole book saying that these EVMs are manipulated. This is the BJP fellow. Now, once having come to power, the BJP is resisting the change tooth and nail, and it is just defending EVMs. We don't know whether EVMs have been manipulated in the past or not, but what we do know is that EVMs can be manipulated. There was a Citizens Commission headed by Justice Lokur, which examined at least 20 computer experts from across the world, and they all came to the conclusion that yes, EVMs are not safe, they can be manipulated. And that is why you see the Constitutional Court of Germany banned EVMs and said you have to go back to paper ballots. They gave these very reasons. They are capable of being manipulated, and therefore they are not safe. Most European countries have gone back to paper ballots. They have gone away from EVMs. Recently, Bangladesh also went away from EVMs. So to my mind, this is another important, very, very important electoral reform that needs to be made, because it goes to the very root of our electoral democracy. So we are living in very, very troubled and dangerous times where there is absolutely no level playing field. The ruling party has all kinds of advantages over the opposition parties, and they are misusing the agencies also to tie up the hands of the opposition by freezing their accounts, by issuing them income tax notices, by arresting their leaders, etc. And therefore, I feel that if we are not able to defeat these people in this election, I feel that despite all this disadvantages that the opposition has and the advantages that the ruling party has, I still feel that if EVMs are not manipulated, these people are not going to get a majority. The BJP is not going to get a majority. This is my own feeling and perception, because people can see that this doesn't sit well with the people. The manner in which agencies are being misused, income tax is being misused, the manner in which electoral bonds were used for getting bribes, etc. This is not going down well with the general people. And I feel that the first step towards reclaiming our democracy is to first defeat the BJP in this election, and thereafter work towards a whole lot of electoral reforms that would be required. Thank you very much.